Hey guys, what's up? It's Charlie here, and today we're going to be looking at the top 10 kids who served crazy prison sentences. In a world full of good and bad people, it's no surprise some people end up in prison. But a group of people you don't often see behind bars is kids. Well, these aren't just kids who went to jail, but kids who went to jail for insanely long times and in some cases their entire lives. Before we get into it, be sure to subscribe to Top 10s, also turn on notifications and comment done when you've done this for a shout out at the end of our next video. Coming in at number 10, we have Alex King. This is one of the most bizarre criminal cases involving kids ever. And with this one, it's pretty hard to decide whether the kid got what he deserved or not. Alex King formed a relationship with his neighbor Ricky Chavez. They made many love notes and did illegal substances with each other. But one day it went too far when Chavez convinced Alex to hit his dad with a baseball bat. This caused his dad to pass away. Alex was sentenced to jail for 20 years as a judge said he was manipulated by Chavez. Do you think this is kind of harsh, seeing as he was kind of manipulated into doing it? Or did Alex know what was going on the entire time? Next up is Lionel Tate. In 2001, a 13-year-old going by the name Lionel Tate was apparently practicing wrestling moves. He was doing it with somebody he was babysitting, a 6-year-old girl who was his neighbor. However, she passed away while this was happening. After an investigation, it was found her fractured bones and internal injuries caused her to pass away. Lionel maintained the wrestling story, but the courts didn't buy it. And this was such an emotive crime that moved the jury, Lionel's sentence broke records. That's right, Lionel Tate became the youngest person ever to be sentenced to life behind bars. At only 13 years old, some say this is way too harsh, but what do you think? Next up is Brian Lee Draper. This teenager was inspired by Columbine in 1999. So in 2006, Brian set out to take the life of a fellow classmate. Him and his friend Tori took the life of 16-year-old Cassie Jo Stoddart, but how they did it is what's scary. They hid out in her house and waited for her to return home. When she returned home, they cut the power so the entire house was dark, just like a scary movie. After that, they proceeded to stick a knife into her 28 times. Brian was sentenced to life for this at just 16 years old. He may have been young, but many say it was deserved. Do you agree? Next up is Joshua Phillips. A few years back, a girl in a suburban neighborhood went missing. The entire town had been looking for her for 8 days. Until one day, 14-year-old Joshua Phillips' mom was cleaning his room. It was while she was doing this that she made the shocking discovery of the girl's body underneath his waterbed. He said he had accidentally taken her life when a stray baseball he threw hit her in the head. He then hid the body as he didn't want her father to be upset. But this was obviously an understatement, as they pursued legal action and he was sentenced to life in prison. Next up, we have Eric Smith. Eric Smith had been bullied his entire life. But one day, he snapped and did the unthinkable. He lured Derek Robbie, who was 4 at the time, into some woods. He then dropped large stones on his head, taking his life. Derek said he was tired of being picked on day in day out and vented his anger onto a little kid. DNA of Eric was found at the scene and he was arrested promptly. He was sentenced to life, but only served 9 years. Some say he got off lightly considering what he did. But then again, he did have some bad experiences himself. This is one very odd story. Kenneth Young is a 15-year-old serving a life sentence, but he didn't take anyone's life. When he was just 15, his mother's dealer threatened him into doing an armed robbery with him, otherwise he would harm Kenneth and his family. He complied, but still tried to do some good by stopping the man from taking many people's lives by pleading with him to just rob them and not harm them. But despite all this, he was sentenced to not just 1 but 4 consecutive life sentences. This is of course totally unfair, but it gets worse. The judge who sentenced Kenneth agrees he has been rehabilitated in prison, not that he even needed to be. But despite this, the judge still refuses to release him. Somebody with power should really look into this, as this seems like a massive case of injustice. Next up is Heather Opel. This is another surprising life sentence which will actually make you feel kind of sorry for the kid involved. In 1964, Barbara Marie Opel got into an argument with her boss. So like any reasonable person, she paid 4 teenagers, including her 12-year-old daughter Heather, to take her boss's life. She said she would pay them, so they did as she said. They struck him with a knife while they pretended to ask for a job at his store. What's even worse is her boss was very ill. After the hit was carried out, she paid them $100 each. But they were all very quickly captured and sentenced. And despite the fact her mother told her to do it, Heather Opel was still sentenced to life behind bars at the age of 12. Next up is Zachary Neagle. This is one of the most baby-faced criminals you'll ever see. Images of him in an orange jumpsuit with a terrified face went viral as he's so young. So what did this kid even do? Well, one day he fired a shotgun at his sleeping father's head while he was in the family room. However, this was because his father had been nasty to him in some way. He believed he had to take some action to protect his siblings. But whatever his motives were, he was sentenced to 97 years in jail for what he did. Some say that's too long, but then again, he did commit a very serious crime. Do you think this is way too harsh, or should this young life taker face the consequences? Next up, we have Antonio Barbeau. This criminal kid is very surprising because of who his victim was. When he was just 15, he took his grandmother's life with a hatchet. The judge said he'd never seen anything as bad as what Antonio had done, and thus he was sentenced to life behind bars with a minimum of 40 years. When Antonio was giving his statements, he began to cry. His lawyer then had to take over, but he also began to cry. It turns out Antonio's friend actually talked him into it, and it began as a robbery. But it went way too far, and now Antonio will have to live with the consequences behind bars for a very, very long time. Coming up next is Petri Kurti. This is a record-holding criminal kid. He's the youngest person to ever take somebody's life in the UK. However, he did not take the life of another innocent kid like Eric Smith. It was actually a fully grown woman. Petri had a crazy home life which led him to joining a local gang. They then convinced him to stomp on a woman's face until she passed away. She was so badly bruised up, she could barely be identified. And thanks to this, Petri is now serving life behind bars. Not only that, his accomplice in crime also went down for being involved in the crime and for robbery. These are some really wild kids. Check out the poll in the top right corner and you can vote for the craziest kid sentence. I think it's Alex King, because that is one crazy story. This video shout out goes to It's Your Girl Roxy. Subscribe and turn on notifications and comment done for a shout out in the next video. But as always, thanks for watching. Check out some more videos on screen right now. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to Top 10s.